The Ukrainian Defense Forces continue clearing Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region of Russian occupiers. This was reported by Senior Lieutenant of the Defense Forces with the call sign Alex, who is the author of the Telegram channel Officer. According to him, after the salient to the north of the city was cut off, all possible corridors for infiltration and supply to enemy units located in Kupiansk were blocked. Alex added that the city of Kupiansk is currently not under the control of organized units of the Russian occupying forces. Moreover, this is no longer even a possibility.
There are isolated individual Russian armed forces soldiers there who have been completely abandoned by everyone.
Earlier, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, stated that Ukrainian forces control 90% of Kupiansk. Z-blogs have also reported that the Russians have lost Kupiansk. The Russian army has lost control over the last section within the city, according to a map from the pro-military blog Rybar, which is affiliated with the Ministry of Defense. The blog reported that a significant part of the bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskil River has been lost, specifically the villages of Kondrashovka, Radkovka and Moskovka, as well as the area around the dairy canning plant. In Kupiansk itself, the situation is worse than critical. The channel writes that the Russian defense is fragmented. According to the blog, these problems arose due to false reports from the Russian command. The statement that the Russian army had gained full control over Kupiansk and its surroundings was made at a time when only extremely small groups were operating there, writes Rybar. The Channel 2 majors called the reports about the capture of Kupiansk an information psychological operation in which the Russians defeated themselves.
For us, it's not so important that a poorly organized psychological operation failed. What's much worse is that, according to our comrades, reserves were withdrawn from the direction, and our forces couldn't properly secure even the positions they had actually reached. In other words, in the information psychological operation about the city, we defeated ourselves, not the enemy.
The military observer also reproached Russian propaganda for spreading tall tales about the supposedly fake President Zelenskyy in Kupiansk.
Apparently, the dreary anti-crisis story about the fake Zelenskyy with a fake video at the city entrance and their own staged videos of controlling the city didn't help them hold on to it in reality. Someone might have thought otherwise, but at least everyone got their medals.
The Telegram channel Kremlin Snuffbox writes that there is a catastrophe in Kupiansk. Putin was lied to about the so-called liberation of the city, and this led to very bad consequences. The channel reports that Valery Gerasimov was the first to announce this.
This is a very sad, I would even say tragic story. When Gerasimov declared that we had liberated the city, he disoriented even the soldiers on the ground. Because of this, more than 100 people were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner.
Citing a source in the Russian Ministry of Defense, the channel claims that the losses are so enormous that fulfilling key objectives for achieving the goals of the so-called special military operation is now at risk. Let us recall that on November 20th, Putin was informed about the capture of Kupiansk. On December 2nd, he himself stated that the city had already been under the control of Russian forces for a week. However, none of these reports have been confirmed by independent OSINT analysts. On December 12th, Volodymyr Zelenskyy visited Kupiansk, thereby confirming that at least the southern part of Kupiansk was under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces at that time. Some Z-bloggers reacted to the video with harsh criticism directed at the military leadership. The Romanov Light blog called what happened a clear result of prematurely reporting victories on credit. However, during the live Q&A, Putin once again claimed that Kupiansk had been taken and cast doubt on whether Zelenskyy had actually visited the city. He said, "They say the monument looks completely different now," said Putin.
During his first year in office, US President Donald Trump stood out for his unpredictable and bizarre behavior. The Guardian published an article in which it analyzed various incidents and mishaps involving the American politician. The publication notes that his unusual behavior raised questions. Trump would fall asleep during some meetings, while in others he would go off-topic, making strange remarks. For example, during a meeting with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Trump abruptly shifted from discussing immigration to launching into tirades about windmills. At that point, the American leader baselessly began talking about how windmills drive whales crazy and how wind energy kills birds. The Guardian writes about the incident, which raised questions about Trump's mental state. In September, the US president convened the country's top military commanders for a meeting in Virginia, where he began talking about how America is respected again as a nation. According to him, the US was not respected under Biden because allegedly he fell down the stairs every day.
I said, "That's not our president. We can't tolerate this. I'm very careful, When I go downstairs, for example, down these stairs, I go very slowly."
It's noteworthy that Trump criticizes Biden while essentially having the same problems himself. Despite Donald Trump himself insisting that he is in excellent health, the question of his abilities and physical condition will become a key topic in the run-up to next year's midterm elections. The Kremlin took offense at the Christmas greeting from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The press secretary of the Russian dictator Dmitry Peskov called the Ukrainian leader's address strange, uncultured, and embittered. In the traditional spirit of Kremlin propaganda, he stated,
"We saw the message about Zelenskyy's truly strange Christmas address yesterday. One wants to ask whether he is capable of making adequate decisions in this regard, of resolving things through politics and diplomatic means."
On the evening of December 24th, Volodymyr Zelenskyy congratulated Ukrainians on the Christmas holiday. He reminded everyone that for the fourth year in a row, Christmas Eve is taking place during a full-scale war for independence. According to the head of state, despite all the hardships brought by Russia, it is incapable of occupying or bombing the most important things. The most important thing is Ukrainian unity. Zelenskyy condemned the massive shelling by the aggressor country on the eve of the holiday. In his speech, the president of Ukraine said,
"Today we all share the same dream and wish. We all make the same wish together. Each of us in our hearts wishes for him to perish. But when we turn to God, of course, we ask for more. We ask for peace for Ukraine."
Military political expert Alexander Musienko commented on the Ukrainian president's Christmas address on his YouTube channel, particularly the phrase that angered the Kremlin.
That he would die. This is a very successful phrase by the president. I couldn't help but recall this address, because it was well said and directly concerns Putin.
It should be noted that the aggressor country Russia continues to shell peaceful Ukrainian cities. On December 25th, Christmas Day, Russians struck a multi-story residential building in Chernihiv. One person was killed and 5 others were injured. On December 25th, a massive fire broke out in Moscow. According to the Telegram channel Baza, the Varshavskaya Plaza business center caught fire. Footage shows how the fire engulfed part of the building. People were evacuated, and the fire covered an area of 100 square meters. The blaze was soon extinguished. Meanwhile, on December 25th, 2 important oil and gas sector facilities in Russia were hit. This was reported by Unian, citing sources in the security service of Ukraine. It is noted that long-range drones from the Alpha Special Operations Center of the SBU successfully struck the Temryuk seaport in the Krasnodar region.
2 fuel storage tanks are burning there. The fire covers an area of about 2,000 square meters. 70 people and 18 pieces of equipment have been deployed to extinguish the fire.
In addition, the Orenburg gas processing plant was attacked. As a result of the drone strike, gas caught fire in the pipeline rack of the unit that purifies raw gas from hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. The technological process at the facility was suspended. And in Russia's Rostov region, the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery was attacked. The attack was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to the agency, the strike was carried out with Storm Shadow cruise missiles.
Multiple explosions were recorded. The target was hit. The extent of the damage is being clarified.
The Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery is one of the largest suppliers of petroleum products in southern Russia. It is involved in supplying the Russian military, providing them with diesel and aviation fuel.
The United States has declassified transcripts of conversations between the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and former US President George Bush. Even back then, in 2001 and 2008, the head of the Kremlin clearly expressed his rejection of Ukraine's accession to NATO and other issues. This was reported by the press center of the US National Security Archive. So, as far back as 2001, Putin told Bush that Ukraine's accession to NATO would create a field of conflict between Russia and the United States and lead to long-term confrontation. The Russian dictator said to Bush verbatim,
I would like to emphasize that the accession to NATO of a country like Ukraine will, in the long term, create a field of conflict for both you and us, a long-term confrontation.
When asked why he saw Ukraine's accession to the alliance leading to such consequences, Putin responded with his favorite narrative, claiming that Ukraine is an artificially created, complex state that was formed from the territories of neighboring countries. At the same time, he emphasized that supposedly a third of Ukraine's population are Russians and that a significant portion of its residents view NATO as a hostile organization.
This creates the threat of military bases and new military systems being deployed near Russia. This creates uncertainty and danger for us. And relying on anti-NATO forces in Ukraine, Russia will work to deprive NATO of the opportunity to expand. Russia will constantly create problems. Why?
Back in 2008, Putin already predicted a conflict between the United States and Russia. Perhaps even then he already had plans for Ukraine. The dictator expressed concerns about NATO's military infrastructure approaching Russia's borders. In Russia, they justify their aggression against Ukraine by claiming that everything here historically belongs to them. They supposedly are not attacking, but merely taking back what is theirs. You simply couldn't come up with a bigger absurdity, says the project Collapse of the Pseudo-Empire, especially the claim that Kyiv is a Russian city.
Kyiv is a Russian city, and from there comes a threat to the existence of the Russian Federation, an international threat. Because although Kyiv is a city with Russian roots, it is governed by an international brigade of Russia's opponents.
The entire purpose of Moscow's existence is its endless attempts to steal Kyiv. To claim Kyiv is to prove one's Europeanness, that is, one's belonging to the civilized world, analysts of the project write. Kyiv is a mark of quality. Without it, the myth of an originally Russian city, a product of Putin's propaganda that emerged at the same time as the idea that Russia is Rus, does not work. Putin's scandalous predecessor, Dmitry Medvedev, made a notable statement: Odessa, come back home. He also claimed that Odessa is supposedly a Russian city. These cynical statements are accompanied by continuous shelling, particularly of Odessa and the Odessa region, which causes suffering for people and destroys port infrastructure and the energy sector.